Can Marmoush and Doku coexist? What is the solution to the Ruben Dias dilemma? And how good is James Trafford? All those questions and more will be addressed on today's installment of Ask Nobbins, the weekly show where you guys submit your questions in the comment section of the video and I answer them. We are going to start with a question from MNJ Gaming Pop 9606. Would you like Ederson as our first choice and Trafford as a second option for goalkeeper, or vice versa? So hopefully this week it's going to be officially confirmed by City that James Trafford is signing for City, and there will be an analysis video of Trafford hopefully by the end of this week, so make sure your notifications are switched on. Of all the signings that City have made in 2025, I think this for me is the one that's got the biggest asterisk and question mark and unknown tag next to it. It's so hard to properly analyse Trafford's career at Burnley in his first season. He was playing for a relegated Burnley side, and they didn't go down because of him, by the way. There were some very good performances from him, but he was so young, 20 years old, 21 years old. Last season, again, still young, 22, in the Championship for a Burnley side that got 100 points under Scott Parker, where they basically were set up incredibly defensively. Trafford barely conceded any goals, but Burnley barely conceded any shots, and that was largely down to how Burnley played. So it's really hard to assess how that would transfer over to Manchester City. Again, that's why I think this is the biggest unknown. And for that reason, I'm quite happy, even though I said in the last Ask Nobbins how I think it is time for City to move on from Ederson as our longer term number one. Based on the context of Trafford coming in, I'm not overly fussed. In fact, I'm quite happy that Ederson is staying and Trafford hopefully is going to be regarded as City's number two at the start of the season anyway. I think it would make a lot more sense to start with Ederson as your assumed number one goalkeeper, give Trafford the cup games, and then see what happens throughout the season. If Ederson has periods where he dips in form like he did last season, and arguably the season before that as well, there's less of a risk in respect of like creating like dressing room upheaval or like creating a political issue in the background. Because we all know that Ederson's definitely going to be leaving next season anyway, based on what's happening right now. So let's say we get to, as I say, January, and Ederson's dropping, stinkers, and his head's not in it, he's not switched on, whatever, or he just gets injured. And if Trafford's impressing in the cup games or the brief Premier League cameos that he's getting, like starting some games at the Etihad against lesser opposition, it becomes less of a tricky political task to naturally ease Trafford into the side and just establish him as like the number one therein. I think this is a perfect scenario for City. Ederson is objectively the keeper who's played the most games under Pep Guardiola, so he is technically the goalkeeper who understands the most what Guardiola demands of his goalkeepers. I don't think there's anyone better for Trafford to deputise under. This is a really interesting question from JS, and this got a lot of likes as well in the comment section. How will City solve the Ruben Dias issue with this new setup? It's fine if Aït-Nouri overlaps, but if Núñez is overlapping, teams are going to target that side in transition. Diaz doesn't have the pace, mobility, or aerial dominance to cover that side. Great at reading the game, but asking him to operate in a high line without as much cover seems cruel. I feel like it's going to be made a scapegoat this season. And this has been a big talking point, hasn't it? The Ruben Dias dilemma, the question mark. The setup that JS is referring to, I assume, is what I have touched on in the past, where I want us to play based on the personnel we have, like this 2-3-5 where both fullbacks overlap. Now, I totally take the points that in respect of the rest defence situation and the vulnerability to the counter-attack, there is a lot of that. Particularly, you would think in behind the fullbacks. Basically, you're asking a lot of Gvardiol, you're asking a lot of Ruben Dias as well. From a physicality profile perspective, a physical profile perspective, a lot of P's there. Kusanov is far more naturally aligned to do that role, if that makes sense. However, I am not convinced that that inherently means that Diaz cannot do that. Just because he's not naturally inclined from a physical perspective to do that. The reason why I'm going to defend Diaz a little bit, and I'm going to back him, and there's a reason why I include him as my right centre-back in every single starting 11, hypothetical 11 I make for next season. There was so much going against Diaz last season, and this isn't me trying to cover up all the errors that he made last season, the bad performances there were some bad performances last season. But I do also think that, again, we've got to look at the asterisks for some of these matches and for some of the season. I think that City's midfield next season will be hugely transformed. Nobbins, you twat. Why are you talking about the midfield when the question's about a centre-back, you little dickhead? Why are you so aggressive? But here's the answer to that. The midfield last season provided zero cover to the defence, realistically. If the defence has zero cover, the defence suddenly is being overburdened with an unfair amount of defensive work. Throughout that period where City were conceding, 5+ non-penalty big chances a game according to Opta, that ridiculous period, it became like a meme on my channel where I kept talking about it. I don't know how much of that can be attributed to, Diaz didn't play that well, that's why the chances were happening. It was because we were so vulnerable and because we weren't providing our defence enough cover and protection. With Rodri coming back into the side, Reinders as well coming back into the side, just purely from an off-ball perspective, that is far more solid, but also from a pressing perspective as well, and the counter-pressing as well, from players like Foden, Savio, Marmoush, Reinders as well. That's always been City's biggest asset from a defensive perspective. It's winning the ball back higher up the pitch, so your individual defenders have less defending work to do. If there is a less volume of defensive work, we will see less errors. Another thing to say, again, it sounds like I'm defending Diaz a lot, and I am, to be fair. I think it is justified. Kanji at right back, Stones and Diaz at centre-back, or Diaz and Ake at centre-back, and then Guardiola left-back. I think most people would have said that's City's best defence at the start of last season. We only saw that back four twice last season for a collective 90 minutes. In both matches, I think that was against Forest at home, and then Real Madrid at home, so the first leg. And Akanji got injured and didn't even make it to the second half in both of those games. So we saw our best defence, well, for me, our best defence based on the start of last season for 90 minutes. I don't think that lack of consistency helped Diaz either. Another thing, though, I think to note is that if we're going to assume that Núñez is our main right-back next season, even though I think Núñez has done a decent job at right-back, he strikes me as a player who needs his hand held, certainly in a settled defence as well. He needs that leadership and communication to know exactly where he should be positioned, because he's liable to make errors in that regard. If you got Kusanov there, he's not going to be doing any of that organising. I don't even know if they speak a shared language, whereas Ruben Diaz clearly can, and he is that leader and he is that organiser. So I think there are far more things going in Diaz's favour than not. There's also been this weird, again, JS mentions it here, where people are saying how he can't play in the high line. I know JS isn't saying that here, but lots of people have said that. That's objectively incorrect. How many times have City won the title where Diaz has been our main centre-back and City have played a high line? Last season wasn't the first season where we played a high line. We'd always play a high line under Guardiola. Pep has had many centre-backs where they haven't been particularly quick. Think of Piqué, for example. There are so many examples where these defenders aren't lightning quick. So I think I think too much has been made of Diaz's lack of pace, personally. We've even played this system before. We've played a 2-3-5. We've won the title with it with Diaz as our centre-back. So I think too much is being made of it. And I expect Diaz to bounce back next season, as I expect a lot of our players to bounce back next season. Kusanov is no doubt the long-term option there. But right now, I'm personally going to back Diaz, regardless of whether people think that he's a weakness or not. I think that the positives outweigh the negatives. This one's from Lego Ninjago, who says, I really love this series. Big up. What is your opinion on Real Madrid paying 100 million for Rodri? They need to triple that transfer fee in the first instance, and then they need to throw in, I don't know, Camavinga, and I reckon a couple of their Champions Leagues from the 50s or the 60s, whenever they won all those in a row. If that is a true number, then it is an insult in a world where Caicedo and Rice are going for in excess of £100 million. No. We've got this one from Shivam, who asks, my question is, if the Doku-Aït-Nouri partnership works well in the upcoming season, what impact will that have on Marmoush? This is such an interesting question, isn't it? So in my ideal starting 11, I'm only starting one of Doku and Marmoush, and I'm rotating between the two. And Marmoush, for me, is starting most of those games. That does not mean that there isn't a system or shape where they can both coexist. Can they coexist? Yes and no. So let's start with the no. What do I mean by that? Whenever it's been, that overlapping left back, normally Guardiola last season, sometimes Nico O'Reilly, and Doku and Marmoush, in general, what seems to happen is when Doku and Marmoush share the pitch, Marmoush is forced to play off the right, And I don't know if he's ever had a good game playing off the right. Does he have to do that when Doku's on the pitch? Well, no, because there was a game against Brighton, wasn't there, where we had, I'm sure it was Guardiola overlapping off the left, and Doku came more central, but Marmoush was also more, so if Doku was like left of centre offensively, Marmoush was more like central, rather than coming off the right, because it was Savio off the right that day. So it can work. You would just, at that point, have to sacrifice probably both of Cherki and Foden. I don't know if that is going to be optimal. It's certainly not optimal for Marmoush's more natural position, but if you're going to accommodate another player for Marmoush, at the expense of Marmoush, the best way to do it in a vacuum is to bin off Cherki and Foden in the same side and probably play Doku, let's say Aït-Nouri, Doku, Marmoush, Savio, and then a Haaland up top, and you probably have to sacrifice both Cherki and Foden. I don't think that's going to be the best thing for City to do. There are lots of games for City to play. I would rather it just be a choice of Doku and Marmoush rather than I've got to pick, one of Cherki, Marmoush, Foden. I don't think that's the correct question. It does depend on how they play. Look, if Marmoush stinks up the joint in a position that I think is going to be his best, he can't play then, can he? If Doku thrives, it's going to have to be Doku, isn't it? In my head, I see it as Doku and Marmoush gunning for the same position based on how I would want to play. There's no reason why they can't coexist, but there are more examples where Doku and Marmoush have played together and Marmoush has not been very good, rather than examples where they've played together and Marmoush has been, even good. It does introduce a tricky question, but again, as fans, we sort of want that. We want players to be gunning for one another's position. Hopefully that elevates the other. We like competition for places. Marmoush is also a versatile forward, so he should be able to play in another area, even if Doku and Aït-Nouri are on the pitch. That's up to Pep to figure out. Well, have you enjoyed this video? If so, please leave a like on the video to show me you have liked the video. If you have a question you want addressed/answered, leave it in the comments of this video and I will try to include it next time. Final comment, which isn't strictly a question, but I did want to address it anyway. It's from Total Football, who says, "We are more likely to win the league next season no matter who Liverpool sign. Given that Rodri comes back to his best and Pep does not play Gundo Silva, Kova in any serious match." The reason why I wanted to pick this comment as the last one is because I think there's been a very weird reaction in the City Online fan base to the Isak news, potentially moving to Liverpool. Isak going to Liverpool does not mean that City's 2025 business has been stinky. The two do not correlate. If someone can name me a better 8 than Reinders that we could have realistically signed, don't say bloody Pedri, that we could have realistically signed, I'd love to hear the name. Likewise with Cherki. The midfield upgrade we will see from City will be astronomical, going from Kova, Gundo, Bernardo to Rodri, Reinders. Whether that's Rodri, Reinders, Bernardo, or Rodri, Reinders, Foden, or Rodri, Reinders, Cherki, or Rodri, Reinders, Nico, whatever midfield you want to use. The quality difference is astronomical. It is night and day. So there is a world where we see a totally transformed City side next season. That is not the same as we'll definitely win the league, but let's not give up on our club before the season has even started. Let's not pretend and revise history and say that these signings we've made have been stinky and haven't been good enough, because again, Cherki clearly is going to be a good signing. Reinders clearly is going to be a good signing. Aït-Nouri clearly is going to be a good signing. Marmoush has been a very good signing. Nico, I'd have liked to see him get more minutes, but he's going to be a very good signing as well. I think Kusanov will be a lovely signing as well. The rest, you could argue, maybe more prospects and projects and that sort of thing. Let's just not revise history. Let's have some perspective. Tranquilo. Let's wait until the season starts and City play like garbage before, losing our shit. I'm not going to resign myself to defeat. I don't have a loser mentality, okay? I'm going to be bullish, or whatever the term is. I'm going to give my side a fighting chance. Let's wait and see, shall we? The transfer window has not even closed yet, and the ball has not even been kicked yet. That was the video. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. This was installment number 10. We will keep this going into next season because you guys seem to enjoy this series. Stay tuned for the Trafford analysis video. That will hopefully be the next upload on the channel. Shout out to all my beautiful members. If you want to join the Hall of Fame and join these beautiful people, click that join button. The link is in the video description as well to support the channel, to support content like this. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed once again, and I'll see you next time.